In the deep forests of the northern wilderness, where winter lasts 6 months and only the strongest survive, a wolf pack ruled the frozen lands. They were powerful, fierce, and lived by one brutal law that had kept them alive for generations. Only the strong deserved to live. Weakness meant death. There were no exceptions. There could be no exceptions. When the alpha female gave birth to 5 cubs that winter, the entire pack celebrated. It had been a harsh year. Food was scarce, but new cubs meant hope for the future. 4 of them were strong, healthy, perfect specimens of wolf genetics. They fought for their mother's milk. They wrestled with each other. They showed the fire that would make them great hunters one day. But the 5th cub was different. He was smaller than his siblings, weaker. His cry was softer, almost pleading. While his brothers and sisters pushed him aside to feed, he waited quietly at the back, getting whatever was left. And in the world of wolves, weakness is not forgiven. It cannot be forgiven. For 3 weeks, the mother tried everything. She fed him first sometimes, giving him the advantage. She kept him close to her warmth. She licked him more, trying to stimulate his growth, but he wasn't developing like the others. While his siblings were already playing and mock-fighting, he could barely stand without stumbling. The pack leaders watched. They discussed in their own way, through glances and low growls. The decision was inevitable. The smallest cub would be exiled, left in the forest to die alone. It was nature's way, the survival of the strongest. The pack could not afford to waste resources on a cub that would never become a true hunter. On a freezing morning, when the sun barely broke through the thick clouds, the mother wolf did what every fiber of her being resisted. She picked up her weakest cub by the scruff of his neck, feeling his tiny heartbeat against her teeth, and carried him away from the den. She walked for over an hour, taking him far enough that he could never find his way back. When she finally set him down in a small clearing surrounded by pine trees, she looked at him one last time. The cub looked back at her with confused, innocent eyes, not understanding why his mother was leaving him. She turned away and never looked back. If she had, she might not have had the strength to leave. The tiny wolf cub lay in the snow, his small body already shivering from the cold. He cried out for his mother again and again. His voice grew weaker with each call. She never answered. She never came back. He had no food, no warmth, no understanding of why he was suddenly alone in this vast, terrifying world. His cries echoed through the empty forest, a desperate plea that went unanswered. Hours passed. The sun began to set. The temperature dropped even further. The cub's cries became whimpers. The whimpers became silence. He was dying, slowly freezing to death, waiting for an end he didn't understand. Not far from where the cub lay dying, perhaps 200 meters away through the dense forest, a red squirrel named Rusty was gathering the last nuts of the season. He was an experienced survivor. He had made it through 3 brutal winters in these woods. He knew every tree in his territory. He knew where the hawks nested. He knew which areas the foxes patrolled. He knew the sound of danger from hundreds of meters away, and then he heard it. A sound that should have made him run in the opposite direction as fast as his legs could carry him. The cry of a wolf. Rusty froze completely, his small body going rigid. Wolves were his greatest enemy. They were death on 4 legs. They hunted anything that moved, and squirrels were easy prey. They killed without mercy, without hesitation. Every instinct, every survival mechanism hardwired into his brain screamed at him, "Run! Hide! Climb! Survive! Do not investigate! Do not get closer! Do not be foolish!" But something about this cry was different. Rusty had heard wolf howls before. The triumphant howl after a kill. The coordinated howls of a pack on the hunt. The territorial howls warning others to stay away. This was none of those. It wasn't the howl of a predator. It was the desperate, heartbreaking plea of something small and helpless, dying alone. Against every ounce of common sense, Rusty began moving toward the sound, slowly, carefully. Every few steps he would stop, listen, make sure this wasn't a trap. His heart pounded so hard he could hear it in his ears, and there, in a small clearing where the snow had drifted into small banks, he saw him, a tiny wolf cub, no bigger than Rusty himself, alone, abandoned, his breathing shallow and labored, his eyes barely open. Half his small body was already buried in the snow. Rusty's first instinct was still to run. This creature, if it survived, would grow up to hunt him, to chase him, to kill him and everything he cared about. This was a predator in its infancy. The smart choice, the survival choice, the logical choice was to turn around and let nature take its course. But looking into those desperate, fading eyes, Rusty saw something he couldn't ignore. He saw innocence. He saw helplessness. He saw a life that was ending before it had barely begun. And he saw himself. Years ago, when he was just a kid, barely old enough to leave the nest, a hawk had attacked his family. His mother died protecting them. His siblings scattered. Rusty was alone, injured, and waiting to die. Another squirrel, An old female who had lost her own children found him. She had every reason to let him die. Food was scarce. Winter was coming, but she didn't. She saved him. She raised him. She taught him to survive. And when she died 2 years later, Rusty had promised himself something. He would honor her memory. He would never turn away from a life he could save. And in that moment, standing in the snow looking at a dying wolf cub, Rusty made a decision that would change both their lives forever. He would save the wolf. For the next 3 months, Rusty did the unthinkable. Every single day from sunrise to sunset, he brought food to the wolf cub. He couldn't hunt meat like a wolf mother could, but he found everything else he could. Berries, mushrooms, bird eggs when he could steal them from nests, even small insects. It wasn't what a wolf should eat. It wasn't enough by normal standards, but it was something. And something was better than nothing. The cub was too weak to move for the first week. He could barely lift his head to eat. But slowly, painfully slowly, day by day, hour by hour, he grew a little bit stronger. Rusty didn't just bring food. He built a small shelter using fallen branches, weaving them together to create a windbreak. He brought dry leaves and soft moss for warmth and bedding. On the coldest nights, when the temperature dropped so low that even Rusty's thick fur wasn't enough, he stayed close to the cub. His own small body heat, combined with the shelter and bedding, was just barely enough to keep the cub from freezing to death. There were nights Rusty himself nearly froze, shivering uncontrollably until dawn, but he didn't leave. Other forest animals watched in complete shock and disbelief. "What are you doing?" a rabbit asked one day, her nose twitching with confusion and fear. "That's a wolf. He'll kill you when he grows up. He'll kill all of us. You're wasting food on a predator," an owl warned from his perch, his voice grave and serious. "Winter is coming. Those supplies could mean your survival. You'll starve because of him." "This is against nature," a fox whispered, genuinely disturbed by what he was seeing. "Nothing good can come from this. You're disrupting the balance. You're creating something unnatural." But Rusty didn't listen. He couldn't explain it to them, couldn't put into words why he was doing this, because every time he looked at the cub, he didn't see a future predator. He didn't see something that would grow up to hunt him. He saw a life. A single, precious life that deserved a chance. He saw the old squirrel who had saved him, showing him that survival wasn't just about being the strongest or the fastest. It was about compassion, about choosing mercy when the world demanded cruelty. As winter turned to spring and the snow began to melt, something remarkable happened. Against all odds, against nature's brutal calculations, the wolf cub survived. The tiny creature who should have died in his first night alone was still alive. He grew bigger, stronger. His legs, once wobbly and uncertain, became steady and powerful. His howl, once a pathetic whimper, became louder and more confident. His teeth grew sharp, his senses became keen, and through it all, every single day of growth and change, Rusty stayed by his side. They developed something unique, something that perhaps had never existed before in nature. A language only they understood. An ear flick from Rusty meant danger approaching. A tail wag from the cub meant safety, contentment. A specific chirp from Rusty meant food was nearby. A gentle nudge from the cub meant gratitude. The wolf cub, who Rusty had secretly named Shadow because of his dark gray fur, learned to recognize his savior's scent from hundreds of meters away. In a forest full of thousands of scents, he could always find Rusty. When Shadow caught his first rabbit, something inside him remembered. He had watched Rusty bring him food for months, and now with his first successful hunt, he did something no wild wolf had probably ever done. He brought half of the rabbit back to Rusty. The squirrel couldn't eat meat. His digestive system wasn't made for it, but he understood the gesture perfectly. This wasn't instinct. This wasn't pack behavior. This was gratitude. This was friendship. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was a bond that transcended species. But as Shadow grew bigger and bigger with each passing week, becoming more of a true wolf, Rusty knew the truth. Their time together was running out. By his first birthday, Shadow was nearly full grown, a magnificent wolf with silver gray fur that shimmered in the sunlight and piercing yellow eyes that could spot movement from 100 meters away. He was strong, fast, intelligent, everything a wolf should be. Other animals stopped coming anywhere near Rusty's territory. They were terrified. The sight of a full-grown wolf walking peacefully beside a squirrel was unnatural, disturbing, wrong. "You need to make him leave," a wise old badger told Rusty one evening, his voice heavy with concern. The badger had lived for many years and seen many things, but nothing like this. "His wolf instincts will awaken soon. You've raised a killer, Squirrel, a perfect predator, and one day, maybe when he's hungry, maybe when something triggers his hunting drive, he'll remember what you really are. Prey." Rusty looked over at Shadow, who was sleeping peacefully under their favorite oak tree, the place where they spent most evenings together. "He would never hurt me," Rusty said. But even as the words left him, he heard the doubt in his own voice. "That's what you think now," the badger replied slowly. "That's what you want to believe. But I've lived long enough to know one truth. Nature always wins. Always. A wolf is a wolf, and a squirrel is just food. That's the way it's been for millions of years. You can't change that." That night, Rusty barely slept. He watched Shadow breathing, watched his paws twitch as he dreamed, probably of running and hunting. For the first time since finding the dying cub in the snow, Rusty felt real fear. Not fear of Shadow as he was now, but fear of what he might become. What if the badger was right? What if this friendship was just a temporary delusion, a brief moment before nature reasserted itself? What if one day Shadow's instincts would overpower everything? All the memories and gratitude, and Rusty would become just another hunt, just another meal. The next morning, with his heart breaking, Rusty made the hardest decision of his life. He led Shadow deep into the forest, to a territory far from his own, a place where he knew wolf packs roamed and hunted, where Shadow could find his own kind, could become part of a pack, could live the life he was meant to live. Shadow followed happily, his tail wagging, thinking it was just another adventure. They had explored together so many times, this seemed no different. But when they reached the edge of wolf territory, marked by scent posts and scratch marks on trees, Rusty stopped. He turned and looked at the wolf he had raised from death, the creature he had saved with nothing but determination and compassion, his impossible friend, the companion who had changed everything he thought. He knew about the world, and then, before he could change his mind, Rusty turned around and ran as fast as he could. Shadow tried to follow, barking and whining with confusion. Why was Rusty running? Why wasn't this a game? But Rusty climbed high into the trees, into the thin branches where wolves couldn't reach, where Shadow couldn't follow. He stayed there, hidden in the leaves, his heart breaking, until Shadow finally gave up. The wolf sat at the base of the tree for hours, whining, waiting, but Rusty didn't come down. Eventually, as the sun began to set, Shadow walked away into the forest, looking back every few steps, hoping his friend would appear. He never did. For the first time in a year, Rusty was alone again, truly alone. He told himself it was the right choice, the safe choice, the only choice that made sense. Shadow needed to be with his own kind. Rusty needed to be safe. This was how it had to be. But that night, curled up in his nest, Rusty cried. He cried for the friendship he had lost. He cried for the cub he had saved. He cried for the goodbye he never got to say properly. He never saw Shadow again. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. Months turned into years. Life continued. The seasons changed. Rusty grew older. The forest remained as dangerous as ever. But he survived, as squirrels do, through caution and experience. He never forgot the wolf cub he saved. How could he? But slowly, painfully, he convinced himself that Shadow had probably forgotten him. Wolves have short memories for creatures outside their pack, everyone said. Shadow had probably found a pack, found a mate, and was living his life. The squirrel who saved him was probably just a distant, faded memory. That's what Rusty told himself. That's what he needed to believe. 3 years later, on a cold autumn evening when the leaves were falling and winter's first bite was in the air, Rusty was foraging near the river. He had grown comfortable in his routines, perhaps too comfortable. Perhaps he had forgotten that the forest is always dangerous, that comfort breeds carelessness, and then he heard it. The sound that every small animal fears above all others, growling. Not just one growl, multiple growls coming from different directions. Rusty turned around slowly, his blood turning to ice. 4 coyotes surrounded him, forming a perfect circle, hungry, aggressive, their eyes fixed on him with predatory focus, blocking every escape route. Rusty ran. He ran faster than he had ever run in his life. He leaped over rocks, dodged through bushes, used every trick he knew. But the coyotes were faster, stronger, smarter. They had done this before. They weren't just chasing randomly. They were hunting with strategy, cutting off his options, hurting him. Rusty reached a clearing and his heart sank. Dead end. A cliff behind him with a 20-meter drop to rocks below. Coyotes in front, closing in. This was it. After surviving for so many years, after everything he had been through, this was how it would end. The lead coyote stepped forward, lips pulled back, teeth bared. Rusty closed his eyes and thought of Shadow one last time, and then a sound split the night air, a howl. Not just any howl, a powerful, commanding alpha howl that echoed off the cliffs and through the trees. The coyotes froze completely, their ears pinning back. That wasn't just any howl. That was the call of an alpha wolf, and it was close. From the shadows of the forest, moving with deadly grace and power, a massive figure emerged. A silver-gray wolf, larger than any. Rusty remembered. Powerful muscles moved under his fur. His yellow eyes glowed in the fading light, magnificent, terrifying, perfect. Rusty's heart stopped. He knew those eyes. Even after 3 years, even though everything else had changed, he knew those eyes. Shadow, he whispered. The wolf positioned himself between Rusty and the coyotes. His stance was unmistakable. Back off or face the consequences. But the coyotes didn't retreat. They were desperate. Hungry. 4 against 1. They saw opportunity. They saw a meal. The lead coyote lunged, going for Shadow's throat. Shadow moved like lightning, faster than something his size should be able to move. One swift strike, perfectly placed, sent the coyote flying into a tree. It hit with a yelp and didn't get back up. The others hesitated, reconsidering their odds. And then, from every direction, answering Shadow's original call, more. Wolves appeared. 5, 8, 10, 12. An entire pack materialized from the forest like ghosts. Shadow hadn't just survived. He had thrived. He had become an alpha, and he had brought his family. The coyotes understood immediately. They were outnumbered, outmatched. This wasn't a fight they could win. They ran, abandoning their injured leader, disappearing into the forest. The injured coyote limped after them, slowly with measured steps. Shadow approached Rusty. The squirrel didn't move, couldn't move. After 3 years, after convincing himself they would never see each other again, was it really him? Had Shadow really just saved his life? Shadow lowered his massive head and gently, with impossible tenderness for a creature so powerful, nuzzled the small squirrel. He remembered. He had never forgotten. The wolf who was saved by a squirrel had returned to save him back. Rusty climbed onto Shadow's back, something he used to do when the wolf was just a cub, barely bigger than himself. It felt the same, but completely different. Shadow walked slowly through the forest, his pack following respectfully behind, keeping their distance, but clearly protective. He brought Rusty all the way back to his territory, to the oak tree where they used to spend evenings together, to safety. Other forest animals watched from hiding spots in absolute disbelief, a wolf pack protecting a squirrel. The natural order turned upside down. Before Shadow left to return to his pack, he did something that no one who witnessed it would ever forget. He brought Rusty a gift, a fresh rabbit, killed cleanly, food for the coming winter. The same kindness Rusty had shown him all those months returned. Shadow howled once more. Not a call to hunt, not a territorial warning, but a promise. A promise that said, I will always protect you. I will never forget what you did for me. And then, the pack disappeared into the darkness, melting back into the forest. Rusty stood alone in the clearing, watching them go. But this time, he wasn't sad, because he understood now what the old badger never could. Nature isn't just about survival of the strongest. It isn't just about predator and prey. Sometimes it's about the power of kindness, the bond that transcends species, the loyalty that defies all instincts, the gratitude that lasts a lifetime. For the next 5 years, Shadow's pack was seen regularly in and around Rusty's territory. They hunted there. They protected it. No predator dared enter. No harm ever came to the squirrel who saved a wolf. The forest animals whispered about it, this impossible friendship, this bond that shouldn't exist. Some called it a miracle. Some called it unnatural. But everyone agreed on one thing. They had witnessed something extraordinary. Rusty saved a wolf who was left to die, abandoned by his own family, given no chance by nature, and that wolf never forgot. Some bonds are stronger than nature itself.